Well, good evening, everyone that may be listening. My name's David Young with the BootBrisbane campaign up here in Cairns. With us this evening, as is usual, is our head coordinator, Bill Bates. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, David.
Oh, that's the way. And our special guest for this evening, ladies and gentlemen, is a lovely lady from the Bundaberg area who is a farmer and business owner, and she's been involved in the Save the Paradise Dam campaign for a little while now, and they've been met with lots of turmoil, lots of head shaking, and we're very looking forward to listening to everything she has to say about the whole debacle. So with us this evening is Judy Plath. Judy, good evening, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, that's excellent to hear. Now, listen, Judy, you're an agriculturalist down in the Bunderberg area, and one of your most important assets down there as a farmer is water, as it is with everywhere in Central and North Queensland. What has driven the whole debacle of tearing a dam wall down, even knowing its importance? Could you just fill us in a little bit about the dam before we learn a bit more about yourself and your involvement in the local community?
Yes, definitely. So as a bit of history, I came to this area about 20 years ago to work with farmers, and it became very clear to me that water was crucial to everything that happened in agriculture locally. At that stage, we did not have Paradise Dam, but the industry stalwarts in the region had been lobbying for a dam on the Burnett River for about 30 years at that time. And when you look back in the history, the first time that people started talking about a dam on the Burnett River was actually in the late 1800s. So there's been talk of a major dam on the Burnett for a very long time, and it took 30 to 40 years of intensive lobbying to end up with Paradise Dam. Now, the original dam that was supposed to be built on the Burnett River was proposed to be around 1 million megalitres. One proposal was for a 1.5 million megalitre dam. We ended up with 300,000 megs. But in saying that, we were very excited to finally see a dam being built and come to fruition. So before that, the district was reliant on bore water, groundwater, and some small weirs around the traps. And there was another dam, Fred Haig Dam, which is still there, which was on the north side of Bundaberg. But while it's a decent-sized dam, it has a far less reliable catchment. So it was really about the reliability of the Burnett River catchment that created the push for a dam on the Burnett. When we finally got that built, it was Peter Beattie who agreed to it as a last-minute election promise to get his member, Nita Cunningham, re-elected. So that's the history of it. And while it was very disappointing to see it be a much smaller dam than was mooted for so long, it was the catalyst for massive agricultural growth in this area. So Paradise Dam was finished construction in late 2005. It wasn't until 2010 that the dam actually filled. And in those 10 years to now, agriculture in this area has absolutely boomed. Peter Beattie, he had the vision. He said in his press release about Paradise Dam that it would attract and build a huge agricultural industry in this area. He predicted some figures. In the 10 years since it filled, this area has actually exceeded the predictions that Peter Beattie made for a 50-year life of that dam. So in 10 years, it's done more than he ever dreamed, and it's created more jobs than he ever dreamed.
Well, it sounds about right when you make the comment that it was basically a last-minute election promise, but at least he legitimately made an effort to make it a serious last-ditch election promise. But nonetheless, through a successive Labor government now, we're at the point where this amazing reservoir of new growth in the industry that you are in, agriculture, has thrived through its creation, is now being torn down. So they're paving Paradise and not even building the parking lot to an extent to sound lame. But what has got us to this point? Because obviously I understand that there are structural problems with the dam that's caused them to be like this. But tell us a bit more about this and why the government, you think, has made this decision to tear the bloody thing down.
Well, so after the 2013 flood, which was a record flood for the Burnett, it was identified that there were structural issues with the dam. Now, just going back a little bit, it was built to a very tight budget, $240 million it was built for. which even 15 years ago was a very tight budget for any kind of major dam. And they used what was then a relatively new technology in Australia, which was roller compacted concrete as the method for building the dam. Now, it's a well-respected method. It's used all over the world, but it was relatively new to Australia, and they engaged a very inexperienced engineer to oversee that project. They had some more experienced people as consultants, but the day-to-day management and running of it was by an inexperienced team who weren't particularly familiar with RCC as a technology. So that's probably part of it. They were put on a very tight budget and were basically told to build the dam to that budget, don't go over. And our understanding is that that's what they did, and where they had to make economies, and that may have contributed to the dam being less structurally sound than ideally you would like. But the other issue was that they built the downstream infrastructure of the dam, what they call the apron and the associated infrastructure, was not built suitably for a dam of that design. And when we look at the damage that occurred after the 2013 flood, it was primarily at the base of the dam, the downstream side of the dam, where there was a lot of damage to the apron and the stilling basin, etc. So Sunwater did some patchwork repairs on that. In the end, in two different projects, they spent $60 million on patching it up. But then there was still this speculation about the wall. And so basically when it hit the media that there was something wrong with Paradise Dam, the conversation was completely about the wall. And it wasn't really until much further on that Sunwater started being more open about the downstream infrastructure being affected and being inadequate. But so just coming back to how it all really kicked off, it was September 2019 that farmers woke up to an email that was sent in the early hours of the morning. Everyone woke up to an email from Sunwater saying, we're about to release 100,000 megalitres from Paradise Dam because the wall is unsafe, and that water will be made available to farmers. Anyone who can capture it and store it on farm can grab that water now. Now, at that time of year, we're actually not irrigating excessively in this district, so it wasn't a great time of year for free water to become available, and a lot of farmers in this area do not have on-farm dams. But some people do. Some people were able to capture some of that water and store it, and some people were able to irrigate with it. But the vast majority of that 100,000 megs was lost out to sea. And keeping in mind, it had taken 5 years to fill the dam. So some of that water that we lost to the sea had taken a long time to be stored. So it was very devastating to the district. And the big thing was that no one knew this was coming. Like all the industry bodies who are typically involved in various different, water committees and so on, none of them had any heads up that this was going to happen. I should mention as well that the Sunwater chair, Leith Booley, became the spokesperson of this bad news. Around the same time, Sunwater's CEO, Nicole Hollows, resigned, and Leith Booley became the spokesperson of the bad news that 100,000 megs were being released from the dam because the wall was unsafe. Now, Leith Booley is also a board member of ISIS Central Sugar Mill, which is the last grower-owned mill in this district. So it was a real double whammy that Sunwater, an organisation that we all deal with and communicate with on a very regular basis, had no communication with us prior to this devastating decision. And secondly, the double whammy of Leith Booley, someone who the growers in the region had come to know a little bit as a board member of their mill, is the messenger to let us know that your wall's about to be destroyed. So immediately there was discussions occurring between industry groups and the government, and it became very clear very quickly that there was not going to be any discussion. It was going to be a flat out, this is what's going to happen, like it or lump it. And it also became clear that things weren't adding up. the various different pieces of information that we were being told didn't add up. So we were very fortunate that local industry group, Bunderberg Fruit and Vegetable Growers, took the initiative to engage an international expert as a second opinion, and that was Dr. Paul Rizzo. Now, just going back to what I said earlier about RCC dams, roller compacted concrete dams, being a relatively new technology in Australia, but worldwide it's a well-regarded technology, and Dr. Rizzo is one of the world's leading experts on RCC dams. He has been involved in building them, repairing them, assessing them all over the world, and he is truly one of the best experts in the field.
Now,
And,
Judy, just to be clear,
yes.
I feel we should just quickly mention, because Bill was enlightening me to the way the dam was built just quickly when we caught up earlier in the day. It is essentially that the dam is started from the base to the top, and essentially over a very slow period of time, day by day, is poured in situ and is formed into one big block of concrete. Is that correct? Like in layman's terms?
Well, it's poured in layers, so that's why it says roller compacted. So they pour a layer, they compact it, and when that sets, they pour another layer, and they use a concrete mix to do that. Now, what they did with Paradise Dam was a low concrete mix. There's debate within the dam community about whether that is a good idea or not. It certainly was a cost-saving benefit, but you know, Ernest Schroeder, who was one of the key experts at the Commission of Inquiry into the dam, and he was also involved in helping to design the dam. He said very clearly at the Commission of Inquiry that low concrete RCC dams can be perfectly safe, perfectly solid, perfectly stable dams. Just because it was a low mix does not necessarily mean it's going to be a faulty dam.
So the expert, so the expert suggested an adequate way to be able to repair it without coming to the point of tearing it down. That's essentially what happened, is it?
Dr. Rizzo, exactly. And please pull me up if I'm giving too much detail. I'm not sure how much detail people want, but you just butt in like that and let me know.
Well, Judy, the story needs context as well. As well, and you're laying it out beautifully. I think Bill just wants to make a quick comment, Judy, before we continue on.
Yeah, just going back to the original construction, I'm of the understanding there was a problem with the original contractor, that there was some bit of consternation from the original contractor to the extent they ended up going broke or failing, and there had to be a second, and then the government had to take over.
It was the original building was an alliance between a number of organisations, and one of them did go broke towards the end of the project. But to be fair, I don't think anything came out of the Commission of Inquiry that indicated that that was the cause of the problem. I think really if you look at the Commission's questioning of different experts, it was probably more to do with inexperience that things arose.
I was just going to add in regards to, as you were saying, inexperience. So it was not the method, but the in process carried out. So the design is okay, but the method or the process and the management of building it had some flaws. And my understanding, speaking to one of the chaps we had on talking about the Burdekin dam, because I just referred to the problems with dams in general and mentioned the problem with the Paradise. And what he suggested is that because the action is layer after layer after layer rolled, and then it depends on that process being fairly continuous. So the layer that you just laid and the new layer bind together, and then again and again and again. But if there's a over lengthy break between ending one layer and the time delayed to lay the next layer, there's a possibility that bonding of those two layers becomes a bit of an issue, because one's set far too fast before the other ones come in.
And there was He suggested that
the dam is trying to move horizontally across some of these layers. Is that the sort of problem the dam's got, or just an overall weakness in the wall?
Well, there was a lot of debate. So the Commission of Inquiry was put together after the news came out about releasing the water from the dam. And because there was so much pushback from industry, they decided to have a Commission of Inquiry. Although now looking back on it, I think that was their plan from the start. They intended to have a Commission of Inquiry, but they made it appear that they responded to growers' concerns and did the commission. But I think they fully intended to do that from the start. But they made sure, but they made sure that the scope, the terms of reference of the commission was very tight. So while it spent plenty of time and energy talking about what may have gone wrong during the construction, it didn't go beyond that and certainly didn't look at opportunities for repairing the dam. But coming back to the methodology, much of the debate about the testing that's been done on the dam and the testing that hasn't been done that should have been done, the debate has been around these couple of engineering concepts of lift joints and cohesion and bonding. And so we could talk about that for a few hours, but basically the Commission of Inquiry indicated that without the correct testing, we're still just having a guess as to whether that bonding has occurred correctly, whether the lift joints have bonded correctly, whether there is enough shear strength there to hold the wall together, etc. But I think what we learned from Dr. Rizzo being involved is that even if the tests come back and say that the lift joints are inadequate, there is methodology available in the dam building sector throughout the world where you can strengthen a dam to make allowances for those kind of weaknesses without needing to lower the dam. I mean, I am not a dam expert. I have an agricultural science background, but I've certainly learnt through this process that it is incredibly rare for any kind of dam engineering expert to suggest lowering a dam wall. It's unheard of, essentially. And there's plenty of other methodology which has been applied all over the world where they strengthen a dam that has issues, but they don't lower it. So Dr. Rizzo was involved with Bagnell Dam in the US. If you type that into YouTube, some videos will come up on the repair work that was done on Bagnell Dam. Now, it's a far bigger dam than Paradise Dam. It makes Paradise Dam look like a puddle, but Bagnell Dam had some issues. They strengthened it. They actually scraped the old concrete off the downstream wall of the dam and replaced it with new concrete, and they strengthened it with anchors and so on. They certainly didn't consider lowering it to address the stability issues. So, like Dr. Rizzo, we engaged him, the farming community here engaged Dr. Rizzo for expert opinion. His report indicated that there were plenty of options to strengthen and repair the dam without needing to lower it. And he started talking, he used language along the lines of there's no need for, an overreaction to this issue. He was trying to indicate, let's just take a step back and be sensible about this. Let's not make knee-jerk decisions. Let's have a look at how we can repair this dam without lowering it. But the government had already made that decision to lower it. But by the time that water was released, that decision was already in train, and all the jumping up and down the world from the farmers wasn't going to change that because the decision-making process had happened well before we became aware of the problem or became part of the conversation.
Just jumping in there, I'm just having a look at an aerial picture of the Paradise Dam, and it doesn't seem to have floodgates. It's just, for all intents and purposes, you might call it a dam, but other people would technically call it a weir because you haven't got the floodgate type situation. There's rather than pull it down, it looks like there's potential you could build another dam in front of it probably and save the whole thing anyway. So there's obviously a lot of material, bedrock material in front of it that could possibly provide the necessary anchoring and support and that to hold the dam wall and that. So it seems a bit of a problem. But I'll just go back to another issue. You said it's only about a 300,000 megalitre dam. And they originally wanted about a one mega, 1,000 mega, 1 million. What would be the difference in the floodplain or the surface area if it had a sort of, and how much higher would it have been if you, to have a million megaliter dam?
Well, from my understanding,
it's pretty shallow.
Yeah, look, from my understanding, and there's other people around who have better knowledge of this than I do, but there was a number of different sites being proposed at the time. So over those 30 years of lobbying to get dam built on the Burnett, there was multiple reports done, and at one time I think there was 5 different options on the table, and then they were sort of narrowed down to 2 or 3 options, and one of them was Kalawa Dam and one was Paradise. But Paradise was meant to be bigger. I believe it was meant to be positioned slightly differently. Kalawa was meant to be in a different position. So basically those previous dams, which had been very thoroughly investigated, to the point of engineering diagrams and so on, they were located differently and built differently. So then when the Beattie government were in a hurry to make election promise in 2002, it was that he made that commitment, Paradise was sort of just a bit of a quick, oh, here we go, we're not going to spend the money to do $1 million megaliter dam. We'll cut it back to what we can fit in our budget, and then they cut back the engineering accordingly. Now, what we believe occurred, and again, this is me as a layperson, not as an expert, that the downstream infrastructure, the Stilling Basin and the apron and so on, was designed to suit this much bigger dam that was on the cards. And in fact, when they cut the wall down and changed it, they didn't really adapt the lower infrastructure accordingly. So what Dr. Rizzo noticed when he came to Australia and visited the dam, he stood on the dam wall and he looked downstream and he said, well, that apron is not suitable for a dam of this size and a wall of this angle. So he immediately saw that without seeing any engineering diagrams or anything. So what we believe was there was a bit of a quick cut and paste, come up with a new design that fit the budget, and they didn't allow for that accordingly. So we sort of, like at the end of the day, we got a dam that was much smaller than what we planned and probably not perfectly built, but at least we had the dam there, and the support, the agricultural growth that has supported has been phenomenal. Now people say, oh, they should build another dam, do it properly this time, blah, blah, blah. The timing that it takes these days to get any kind of infrastructure built, and we've seen that with other proposals all throughout the state, nothing ever happens. We had that dam. We want that dam. Keep the dam in place that we had there. Let's repair it. Let's strengthen it. We can make huge contributions to the Queensland economy with a 300,000 megaliter Paradise Dam. If there were to be a bigger dam or other structures built down the track, fantastic. But let's not pin our hopes on a future dam that could take another 30 or 40 years to be built. Let's work with the dam that we've got, which has already supported massive growth in this region.
I'm just interested in another thing you said in regards to it's a 50-year life dam. That's a relatively short time for a dam, but there again, I presume it's the method it's used. Because a normal old concrete dam's got at least a 200-year life, and maybe more, as long as it doesn't get concrete cancer. So it's a very short-term dam in the scheme of things. So it would seem to me reasonable that everything's done to keep it as it is, and start budgeting now for a new one in 40 years' time, and that gives you at least 10 election promises to get a new one.
Yeah,
I don't know. That seems more scary than anything, Bill.
I mean, like Dr. Rizzo talked about different dams he's worked on in the States, and some of them are 100 years old, and they've been repaired multiple times in their life. I don't know where the 50-year life came from, but that's what was quoted in Peter Beattie's documents at the time. Bundaberg be happy with the 50-year. Yeah, well, the thing is...
He probably knew that they're going to build it badly.
Well, he certainly knew they were doing it on a budget. There's no doubt about that. And he knew it was a much smaller dam than was ever proposed. But the other issue that's really come to light through this whole process, because we've all the farmers in this area who've been involved with trying to save Paradise Dam, we've all learnt a lot about dam engineering in a very short period of time. And it has become very clear that Sunwater as an organisation has really downscaled its engineering expertise in-house. They farm out almost all their key engineering decisions to other organisations, typically GHD. And you talk to fellas from the good old days within Sunwater, or when it was water resources or what have you, they talk about the expertise they used to have in-house and the engineers they had that were very experienced, incredible men. And now there's just none of that. Like, we don't even know who's involved with repairing Paradise Dam. They're supposedly doing anchor trials and so on right now. We don't know who's driving that project. We didn't know who was involved with building it in the first place. The Commission of Inquiry very clearly highlighted that perhaps there was a lack of expertise in building it in the first place. Are we facing that kind of situation happening again with the way that Sunwater has their doors very tightly closed as to who is involved with building it, repairing it? And are we facing that situation again where we're farming out these key engineering decisions to an external organisation who have staff changes constantly, and we're not privy to any of that? I mean, in the good old days when Wivenhoe Dam and so on was built, the names of the key engineers were put on the plaque at the dam. These days, it's just a faceless thing, and you have some PR person who's telling you what's going to happen with the dam, and most of these PR people have marketing degrees. They don't have engineering qualifications.
And the politicians turn up to cut the ribbon.
Yes, exactly, and they really don't know how it's being done. I mean, Palaszczuk campaigned on her safety record, prior to this election. But when you look at Sunwater's safety record, it's actually pretty miserable. And I think a lot of that has to do with the farming out of their engineering expertise.
Well, actually, in our previous week's episode, when we were talking to Bill, what was the gentleman's name who was a very knowledgeable on the Burdekin?
Chris Squelch.
I don't know. Part of that.
Yeah, look, Chris was amazing in his expertise when it comes to just talking about the general availability of expertise when it comes to these things. And I think it comes down to a simple thing, Judy, and the Paradise is a great example of a letdown of procedure when it comes to doing something monolithic, like monumental, like building a dam. Is don't involve politics at the start of it, and it certainly shouldn't be involved at the end of it. But you want to make do with the dam that you had, and you still had a political answer. You wanted to build a dam in the first place, and you got a political answer. It was less than it was supposed to be. It was built inadequately. It was given the contract was given to somebody with the inexperience to be able to carry it out efficiently. And I think that is ultimately the problem, because it's something that we're lacking across Central and North Queensland. Is the political sway to be able to say, no, we want things done properly, we want things done for our best interests, and we don't want Band-Aid decisions made or repairs made or promises made right before an election's made to just try and help you get over the line at the next election and maybe be the 2-seat difference that gives you government. And Chris was interesting when he made the point about the fact that the Burdekin's been ready to be raised 14 metres higher for about 20-odd years. There's nothing in its way to be able to be tomorrow. If they really wanted to be able to make it 14 metres higher, tomorrow could be the day that they approve that. The federal funding and the state governments, if they just got in line, agreed, and the funding was made available, it could happen. There's no environmental surveys or anything that needs to be done. It could happen, but that political representation is not there. The actual ability for us to be able to say this is important to happen for our region, and obviously more important for the people that live in the Burdekin than it is for somebody that lives in, say, Cairns. But we understand the importance of water and the fundamental flow-on effects, pun not intended, of course, to the local community and the agricultural booms that obviously you guys have experienced out at Paradise. The mind boggles when we can't just have the right things done at the right time for the right reasons in a logical manner until the politics of the southeast corner get in the way, and the availability of the revenue that is made and lost out to sea. And that was another great example that Chris made. I mean, you made the example. You made the point that they gave you an email early in the wee hours of the morning to say we're dumping 100,000 megalitres of water. But my question I had for you when you made that comment, which I held till now, is how long was it before they dumped the 100 megalitres of water?
100,000 megs. They started immediately. So
see, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and my husband was just scratching around that following week trying to figure out how to get this water that was running down the river, how to get it into our dam. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And that was the first thing that alerted us to something is seriously fishy here. I mean, and it's come to light since that Sunwater can't get insurance for Paradise Dam because of the question marks around it, and that includes their directors. Their directors can't get liability insurance for any decisions relating to Paradise Dam. So it feels to me like the directors of Sunwater, which includes Leith Burley, are scrabbling to cover their bases to make sure that they're protected. And they made a quick decision, we better let that water out quick smart because we don't want any kind of legal repercussions down the track. And don't get me wrong, everyone understands the safety issue, absolutely. But it comes back to what you were just saying, for people for doing things for the right reasons, for the best of this state and for the people of this state. And we just see too many examples of people covering themselves and not doing something, not showing true leadership for the betterment of this state and the whole state. And I think a lot of it is to do with, what we call career politicians now. I mean, if you look back to, say, Nita Cunningham, who was our local member for Bundaberg for 8 years, I believe, and before that she was the mayor. Now, she was a Labor member. She was passionate about this region. She fought fiercely to get Paradise Dam built, or a dam on the Burnett River. In fact, Anastasia Palaszczuk spoke at Nita Cunningham's funeral and told a story about Nita Cunningham bringing strawberries down to Parliament, handing them around and then saying, if you like those strawberries, you need to support me in getting Paradise Dam built because that's how we'll keep growing strawberries out of Bundaberg. So, I mean, she was passionate and she was there for the right reason, I believe. And people speak very highly of her when they look back on the hard work that she did to get that dam built. And now I feel we have too many politicians who are there as career politics. They don't live and breathe in their region like Nita Cunningham did. And, we get these kind of decisions being made as a result.
Yes, and it's unfortunate that it's I guess let's use Sunwater as an example of an organisation that's run in that specific manner. And I think you outlaid it quite fairly that everyone can understand the dangers and the risks involved in if we had the dam. But if it was mitigated and safely observed throughout the future in the decades to come, especially if it was a dam that was allegedly only going to be a 50-year life cycle anyway, surely the mitigation could have been sufficient enough. But I think the point that you touched on was quite interesting, is because we have the similar scenarios in other industry, and one is like Ports North, for example, where there are these people that aren't necessarily making the decisions that's in the best interest of the people that have anything to do with the Port of Cairns. And I think it's probably the same for the organisation of Sunwater. And I think that's part of the reason why, is because the political influence of our southeast Queensland representatives have the leash too tight on these people to be able to adequately do well by their communities. And to be honest, most of them might not necessarily be for the communities or from the communities. I think that's ultimately one of the worst things that's happened in politics in Queensland for the last 3 or 4 decades. And if it's as simple as building a dam, even if you're on a restricted budget, surely the expertise, even of somebody that builds dams differently, could have ultimately resulted in a far better scenario than the one that you guys are experiencing at Bundaberg. It's just quite sad affair, isn't it?
It is really sad, and there's really no inclination from the returned Palaszczuk government to restore the dam. There was no commitments before the election to restore the dam. We don't see any indication that they have a political will there to restore the dam. Just coming back to what Dr. Rizzo said, and I think this is really important when we talk about the safety issue, because Bundaberg Township has been bamboozled with a lot of scare tactics from the Sunwater PR machine, telling them that, and Minister Lynham before he left, telling them that they were about to be flooded out to see if Paradise Dam collapsed. Dr. Rizzo said, an alarmist atmosphere has evolved over the safety of Paradise Dam without adequate basis. The distressed state of the dam can be remedied at a reasonable cost, as has been accomplished with other dams around the world, without negative consequences or extreme action. So here's an expert in the field who knows more about RCC dams than all the experts who spoke at the commission combined, probably. And he's saying there is absolutely no need to lower it in order to make it more safe. But Bundaberg was sold this story that it had to be lowered immediately to make everyone safe. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter what you say against that version of events, that overrides everything. Because as soon as you say the word safety, everyone's terrified. And certainly we've seen the sun. Yeah. So, and the thing is that GHD, it's hilarious how GHD pop up all the time, and they're consulting to Sunwater on how to repair the dam, but they also consulted to the local council on flood management issues. And in that report, they said that Paradise Dam contributes virtually nothing to flood mitigation for Bundaberg. So, they basically said that the dam has little impact on whether Bundaberg will be flooded or not. Even if it were to collapse, by the time it were to collapse, Bundaberg would be well and truly flooded and would be well and truly evacuated, because Bundaberg is built on a floodplain. Right on either side of a river that floods, there is a township. It will always have to be evacuated in flood conditions, whether Paradise Dam is there or not. And the council and Sunwater has very comprehensive evacuation plans. They have plenty of warning before the flood actually hits Bundaberg Township itself. And people are evacuated whenever there's a flood. We saw that in 2011 and we saw it again in 2013. That will happen regardless. And if the wall were to collapse, it would only be once the river was in full flood. And Bundaberg would have already been evacuated by that stage. So this impression that Minister Lynham and Anastasia Palaszczuk have given, they've both said in the media that thousands of people are at risk. That is blatantly untrue. And they're allowed.
It's not like you wouldn't have the time to mobilise to respond. Yeah.
Well, they'd already be evacuated. Those thousands of people that they referred to are already evacuated. In fact, Minister Lynham referred to the 48,000 people who live in Bundaberg. Now, a lot of the township are not in a flood zone. He's suddenly trying to tell Bundaberg that the whole town is at risk of flooding if Paradise Dam collapses. It's total misinformation, but he's never held to account over that. And Anastasia Palaszczuk used a similar line just before the election, talking about thousands of families at risk. That's blatantly untrue. And the local mayor called them out on it. The mayor pointed it out that they were being untrue in saying that.
I think, Judy, if I may summarise in the way, it's been enlightening hearing everything you have to say about the Paradise Dam, but I'm going to put it in a context from start to finish. The way I see it is, I think Paradise Dam, from the political involvement from the very beginning, was always doomed. And I just think it's the greatest shame for the Bundaberg area in central Queensland that is the case, purely based on the fact, and even when you say now that the PR machine from Sunwater is almost taking a political response to scare the population, to saying that this is the best decision for your interests. It's I just can't help but think from the point of even having an expert in dam structural integrity and concrete pouring, and when it comes to dams, say give this contractor with my help $80 million and we'll be able to repair this and it'll still make the 50 years. When the narrative does not befit what has already been set in place from a political perspective, I suppose it's just crazy, and it's beyond illogical to a point that what has become a thriving community, or increased thriving community over the last 20 years is now being torn down in front of your eyes. It's such a shame. And look, it's a simple matter of the fact that people in Central and North Queensland understand the importance of water. We understand the importance of the agricultural capabilities it gives us, as well as bringing life to areas that otherwise would not have had as much. It's as simple as that. I mean, Bob Catter has a funny quote that he always sticks out, love him or hate him, is you put water on the ground and things grow. But it's not just about the things that grow from the water. It's about the communities that thrive around the fact that something is now growing where the water is. And Paradise being torn down is probably one of the greatest saddening things that could have come out of the southeast corner in the decision-making processes that our political governance has given us. And look, that leads us to part of the reason why there's people like ourselves that understand this and think, well, maybe we should just get rid of the component of these people that don't understand the complexities of central North Queensland living and the importance of things like dams, the importance of things like roads being linked all the way up to remote areas like Weipa and sealed and made a little bit safer because people travel between these communities, smaller as they may be. It's of great importance to those of us that live up here. And for Paradise Dam to be torn down and for all the local community like yourself and the farmers missing out on opportunity for both your future generations to be able to take advantage of it, as well as the economic benefits, the tax revenue that may come of it. The whole affair, the mind boggles. And that's why there's some of us like ourselves that think, well, if only we had the representation fairly distributed between Central and North Queensland to be able to make the decisions where $240 million or whatever the $200 million was to build Paradise Dam might not have been this sad affair. And the potential to be able to make bang for buck projects like Paradise Dam, like the Burdekin Wall being raised, like Nalinga, like any of the other countless dams in Central and North Queensland that could be built, could be raised. The potential for tax revenue alone should make these people want to be able to go through with them. But yet here we are, lacking the political representation to be able to sufficiently do that. And look, I think Paradise Dam, for all the sadness that's involved with the fact that you guys are there now seeing it being torn down, is a great example of why we should just change the way that we see things.
Oh, look, you make some very good points there, and really, it's been incredibly disheartening to this community to see political decisions come out of Brisbane with very little regard for the real on-the-ground people that it affects. Apart from, people can be cynical about it, say, oh, those farmers, they're just worried about their back pocket. It's far more than that. There's a strong emotional attachment to water. Anyone who lives in a regional area who has to worry every day, every month, every year whether there'll be enough rain. We all have a strong emotional attachment to the importance of water, and it's far more than just whether we can pay our bills or not. And we look at the people that we employ who we care about and we want to support them, and you worry about their futures, you worry about the job threats for them. And, when we've seen people like those farm workers fighting just as hard as us to save that dam, shows how important it is to the whole community. But, when people sit in the ivory tower in Brisbane and make these decisions without any real thought for the real people they affect, it's incredibly disheartening. And when someone like Leith Booley, who's a board member of a local sugar mill, and knows that the sugar industry will be heavily affected by a lack of irrigation water availability in this area, it's quite soul-destroying, to be honest, to see someone like her be the spokesperson.
He sounds like he's in such a predicament. That Leith Booley, I mean, he talk about a rock in a hard place.
It's a she.
Oh, sorry, she. I apologise. Sorry, but fancy being on the board of both of those different things. It's like a conflict of sorry. So we're going to stop more water coming out, and then go on, put on your other hat, and say, oh, I think the sugar yields are going to be lower this year, guys.
Yes, we found it very difficult to understand how she can do both. I think the sugar industry will be the first industry that's negatively affected as time goes on and we start feeling the full effects of Paradise Dam being lowered. It's the sugar industry that's going to feel the effects first. I mean, it's already happened this year, for example, temporary transfer of water. So when someone hasn't used their full allocation, they temporary transfer it to a neighbour or something. A bloke was telling me how they're older farmers, they're not using all their water. They offered it to their next door neighbours who are cane farmers for $70 a megalitre, and they knocked it back. And then they offered it to an avocado grower who happily paid $100 a megalitre for it. So, immediately you see that water is going to move to those crops that are able to pay for it. And as it becomes more scarce, it's going to be those higher value crops that will soak up any extra water that's around, and it's going to be the sugar industry that's going to suffer because we won't be able to compete. And so how Leith Booley can, sit on both boards is beyond me, honestly, and it's very disappointing. It's hard enough when you're dealing with faceless bureaucrats out of Brisbane, but it's when it's someone who has sat in your district and should understand what's happening to your district that's even harder to fathom.
Just jumping in there, is there a projected losses from production going forward? So you lose a third of the available water. Has industry and individuals done any sort of projections what their losses will be going into the future?
Yeah, when this was first announced, the industry got together with the local council and commissioned an economic study by Adept Economics. It was very thorough. It showed that there would be a $2.4 billion loss over 30 years from the lowering of Paradise Dam. But we all believe that's quite conservative. In the last 5 years, there's been massive investment in this area from big corporates, buying up farms, buying water allocations, etc., for avocados, macadamias predominantly. And that investment had only just started. And it's all now ground to a halt because of Paradise Dam being lowered. But that report, captured some of that. But you really don't know what opportunities have been lost because the water is now not available. But $2.4 billion over 30 years. And you mentioned it there before about the cost of repairing it. If we worked with Dr. Rizzo, I fully believe that the $100 million that's been spent on lowering the wall and the PR machine to convince everyone that it had to happen, that $100 million could have repaired the dam and made it stronger for the future. And, Dr. Rizzo again indicated that in his report, that it could be repaired for a reasonable cost. So given that situation is there, you really have to question, is there another agenda here for lowering this wall, especially when the Labor government is showing no indication to wanting to repair it? You do have to question.
Just a matter of interest. So when's it scheduled to start the work to deconstruct the dam? Is that in progress, or is it just scheduled in the future sometime?
Oh, no, it's well in progress. So they've already taken 5.8 metres off it. They're saying that now that we're coming into the wet season, they're going to put a temporary cap on that new lowered wall, and then they're doing further testing. They're doing some experimentation with different repair techniques and so on. But there's no clear indication that they intend to put it back. They keep saying, we're waiting on testing results and what have you, but there really is no clear indication that they intend to put it back. So at the moment, we're at 5.8 metres, but if you go off Sunwater's own documents, they have proposed that it could need to go lower to meet the safety requirements that they're aiming for. So we still don't know if this is as low as it will go or whether they will lower it. The other thing that they've done recently, and this is where their PR machine is so effective. Sorry. They've changed the terminology they're using to describe the water level in the dam. So where it was at 40. Sorry.
Take a moment. Have a glass of water or something. Have a moment.
I don't know.
We can edit this out if you want to pause for a drink or something, rather than choke.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've had a couple of drinks. So it was at 42% capacity, and that's the kind of numbers that were being quoted to industry as to the water level. Now they've changed. The new lower wall is now what they call 100% capacity. So now when they quote what level the dam's at, they're saying it's at 82% or whatever it is. So by using different terminology, they're making it sound better than it is. Instead of it being at 42% of the original capacity, it's now at 82% of the new capacity. And one day, all that old terminology will just fade out, And all we'll talk about now is the new capacity, because 82% sounds a lot better than 42, doesn't it?
Yep.
I mean, don't quote me on those numbers, but yeah.
But if that now 100% so only 100 megalitres instead of 300,000 megalitres, well then
that's right.
That's a bit of a problem. For a country that's water challenged, right? This whole continent is water challenged. We are completely adverse, or have become adverse, to building dams, and it's something that sort of started in the late 80s. That comes in probably with the environmentalists and that. I mean, you had the Brisbane floods of, I think, 1974 that were catastrophic, and so the original had the Somerset Dam there, and then out of the Royal Commission they recommended that 3 additional dams be built on the Brisbane River, which the first which was Wivenhoe, and then 2 other smaller ones further downstream, and that was basically a combination of water storage and flood mitigation. So especially the 2 lower ones were there to save Brisbane from catastrophe if some major rain event. Now, all those provisions were made out of that Royal Commission in regards to A, building the Wivenhoe Dam, and B, reserving the land for the other 2 downstream dams. Then we seemed to get into the late 80s and 90s, and all of a sudden the Wivenhoe was built, and then all the legislation was put in place to actually take away those reserves for the 2 outstanding dams and turn them into national park area or something like that. So it prevents dams being built. So then you got the early 2000 floods, and or might have been a bit later, the Wivenhoe Dam, a bit of mismanagement on the flood release and that, and you had Brisbane being flooded again. Now, you would think that you would have some soul searching in regards to, gee, why didn't we build the dams out of that first Royal Commission? Because basically the Royal Commission after the second lot of floods basically condemned them for not putting in place the recommendations of the 1975 Royal Commission. So we just seem to have this adverse. We just don't want to build, or governments or inner city people don't want more dams built for some reason, and that probably extended to your original Paradise Dam in regards to there was probably moves afoot to start building in the 80s, like when Joe was around, when I had a chance. Then the 90s things started to slow down, and then you got plenty of studies but no action, and then eventually, by default, you eventually got a dam, rather than something that should be a core factor for all governments in Australia, every state government and the federal government, to keep building dams and get this dry country irrigated and have water security. But they're just so adverse to it.
Yeah, we seem to be in denial.
I think it goes, just quickly, I think it goes to your point, Judy, that you made about the fact that in decades gone by, these organisations and government organisations like Sunwater, they had expert engineers. They had a staff of very well-trained, experienced people in regards to these things, instead of just dishing it out to a consultant or a contractor. I think that's a very fair point that you made earlier that sort of touches on what Bill said. But sorry, Judy, go.
No, well, I think you're right about, Sunwater's role has shifted dramatically from, exploring opportunities for new water storages to just simply managing the ones they've got. And if you read the state government's 30-year infrastructure plan, they've got one there called the Bulk Water Supplies Opportunity. It's a 30-year plan for water in this state. It is so very clear in that document that this government has no intention of building extra storages, and if they do, they want someone else to pay for it. They don't want it to cost the state anything, and they say that every water asset should return a dividend to the state treasury. So instead of acknowledging that water is a key element of survival, like without water, food and shelter, none of us can survive, we should be treating that like the way that we treat roads and other pieces of key infrastructure, where they're a state asset that benefits the whole economy and the whole community, and we all benefit from it, whether we drive on it or not. We don't seem to see, or this government doesn't seem to see, water infrastructure as an asset that benefits the whole state. And instead, only the direct users of that water are expected to pay for it and contribute to it, and the government's expected to make a profit off it. Yeah, and if we had the same approach to all those big highways between Brisbane and the Gold Coast, it'd be very interesting to see what would be happening if we had toll roads on all of those roads that people drive up and down every day to commute. If we had the same approach as a full cost recovery approach like we do with dams, it'd be very interesting to see how Southeast Queensland would view the situation. They all enjoy the luxury of those roads, but they're very happy to sit back and tell regional Queensland how to live their lives. We don't go down there and tell them, there's only one person in every car on this 5-lane road. There's 5 lanes of traffic and there's one person in every car. You're going to get fined for that. We don't go and stick our noses into the way they live, but they're very happy to be telling us how to live in regional Queensland.
And I suppose how many $200 million projects for making 15-minute quicker commute travels has been made, as opposed to just spending it on a thing like Paradise Dam sufficiently, or at least saving it. And look, I guess that's ultimately the plight in which Central and North Queensland is left with. Hey, look, guys, I just want to mention too, we've just approached an hour, so we might have our finishing thoughts and wrap up this evening. So, Bill, did you have a thought then?
Yeah, I just want to say, well, just imagine how many dams we could have and the economic growth we could have for the cost of one cross-city rail.
Yes.
Now, cross-city rail, I think when they first muted it was $5 billion, then I think it's $7 billion. But if they get
gone out to 11 or...
I was going to say, if they get any change at a $12 billion, they'll be lucky. So to save them 8 minutes of travelling time, they're denying the whole state the potential growth of billions and billions of dollars of wealth creation in agriculture, water security, by focusing on that rather than the rest of the state. And the sooner we can get shot of the southeast corner, the much better off we will be.
Well, I think, Bill, I'm glad you brought up the Cross River Rail, because, the Courier Mail reported that it's likely to blow out to costing $12 billion. Now, when you read that 30-year plan of the state governments for bulk water infrastructure, it says in there that all of Sunwater's assets, which includes 19 major dams, 64 weirs, 625 kilometres of water channels, all their pumping stations, 2,000 kilometres of pipelines and water treatment plants, all the gear that Sunwater owns would cost $13.7 billion to replace it. So for the same cost as we're spending on Cross River Rail virtually, for an extra $1 billion, we could double all the infrastructure that Sunwater has in this state. And when you think about the wealth that infrastructure would generate compared to what Cross River Rail will generate for this state, it's chalk and cheese, isn't it? But it goes to show...
It'll cost money. It'll cost money. It doesn't stop at $12 billion. It'll cost more money in subsidies.
Well, every public journey, every public fare journey is basically requires $11 of taxpayer subsidies, from my understanding. So that's horrific in regards to and that comes about from the high cost of rail rolling stock, wages, and all those sorts of things in running the system. But my understanding, the public transport system is basically subsidised by the taxpayer to $11 per ticket.
Well, that's pretty scary, really, when you think about it. And at the end of the day, Southeast Queensland seems to have a fair say as to how regional Queensland operates. But what frustrates me the most is that when do they stop and think about the real world people who get jobs out of the water infrastructure that could be built in regional Queensland, the water infrastructure that already exists in regional Queensland? And when I think about the people that we employ ourselves personally, some of the wonderful farm workers that I've met through this campaign, these down to earth, salt of the earth people who just want to live an honest life, go to work every day, do something productive, and go home and love their children. Why doesn't Southeast Queensland care about those people? It's fair enough if they think that farmers are environmental vandals and so on and so on. But what about those honest, hardworking people who rely on farms for their livelihood? And there could be a lot more of them benefiting from reliable work if we built more water infrastructure in this state. Yet we don't seem to take any notice of them. They can't all work at Kmart. Where do they? I mean, there's one lovely lady I've got a video of who works on a farm. She's missing half her front teeth. Do they really think she's going to turn up to Kmart and get a job? Where does Southeast Queensland expect these people to work? And they're just hard-working, decent people. Why don't we care about their futures?
Well, they're deserving of a future just as much as anybody who might live in the Southeast Queensland. And Judy, that was very well put, and we might even finish tonight's episode there. And thank you very much for spending. Look, and I must say, we didn't even touch on the green tape that agricultural people like yourself and farmers experience aside from Paradise Dam. And that's another component, because Chris outlined it very, very expertly when he just said, I had a conversation once with some idiot where I told them when they were telling me about the erosion on my own property, you do realise that I have to pay you for the water that I use. I ain't putting any more than I need on my bloody crop, mate. I couldn't believe it. I laughed my guts out. I really did. But we could talk all night on that different subject alone. But listen, it has been an absolute pleasure having you enlighten us about the Paradise Dam situation. It's unfortunate it has got to the point that it has. Look, we do appreciate you taking time out of your evening to come and join us, and you've been very enlightening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
No, that's right. Bill, did you have any? Did you have any finishing thoughts?
I think we want to wrap it up there on Judy's last note on the difference between people that endeavour to make a daily dollar versus the people who think they should run the show down in the southeast corner.
Well, that's exactly right. And you know what? They forget where the food comes from, hey, Judy?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think we're all a bit tired of saying that, really.
Yeah, exactly. It's become a bit of a nuanced thing. But
yeah, we all know it.
Very well put.
Yep, massive. All right.
Well, thank you again, Judy, and
thank you.
Yeah, for anyone that may be, thank you, Judy. Thank you. For anyone that may be listening, my name's David Young with the BootBrisbane campaign up in Cairns, signing off. If you want to learn more about the Paradise Dam and the unfortunate situation, you could go ahead and Google, or I'm sure you could look up organisations like the one Judy is a part of down there, who did their darndest to try and make sure it would stay up. But if you want to learn more about the New State campaign and how some of us would rather that dams like the Paradise don't get torn down or build more of dams, we would have a better chance of doing that in a new state. And that's why we're all about trying to see if we can't create one. So you can visit bootbrisbane.com where you can learn more. That's our website. Likewise, we've got a Facebook page you could visit as well, which is just bootbrisbane.com. A sister page is Yes to a North Queensland State, and it's also the sponsor of tonight's show. You can go on and learn more about the ongoings of Central and North Queensland politics and anything to do with the new state there also. You can tune in Mondays for a fellow podcaster like myself, Matthew Malone, who's got a channel, Northern Vibe, who has interesting and amazing guests like we have had this evening with Judy Plath. And you can learn more about the ongoings of your local communities and local regions and anything that's happening, both from the agricultural people all the way up to crime and misconduct and just a better future and the hopes and aspirations of people from our communities. So with that, thank you for listening, everybody, and good night, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, everybody. Good evening, Bill. Good evening, Judy.
Good night.